relatively calm there on the streets. They've got a big job to do, but this is what they are trained to do. So let's bring back in Gregg, Jarrett, and Ethan Bearman as we are reacting to what we're seeing tonight and with the president. Gregg, the president talked about all kinds of things tonight. Obviously, he talked about the Bidens. He talked about impeachment. He's got a lot on his mind these days and a lot on his plate. And he seems like what he enjoys most is being out with the people, doing these rallies. And he seemed to be in a good mood.
Yes, he is. And in fact, I talked with him for 25 minutes over the weekend ahead of his appearance here tonight. And while there was a discussion, about the impeachment inquiry, he was mostly focused on what he believes Americans care about the most. He talked, yes, about foreign policy, Syria in particular, North Korea, Iran, these challenges, but mostly he talked about domestic issues, all of which he seemed to address tonight to the people there who support him, and notably immigration. He talked about that. And of course, that is such a hot button topic across America, and in particular in Minnesota. But he also talked about drug policy as well as taxes, the economy, and so forth. So, when former National Security Advisor Susan Rice says he is absolutely obsessed and distracted with impeachment, and therefore that's a risk to national security, I did not get the sense that this was a president who was distracted from the important issues that most Americans care about.
I think that we have a soundbite of the president talking about this tonight. If that is ready, we'll go ahead and play what he had to say about the whole impeachment inquiry process at this point.
When all of their ludicrous hoaxes have been exposed as frauds, these sinister fakers then try to impeach you for daring to call out their own corruption. There's nothing like the dirty political establishment.
So, Ethan, that's what this president says he's all about firing back against. And, that's his base there. They want to hear him as a fighter. That's what they wanted. That's why they voted for him, because many of them felt nobody had been fighting back. He gave them that tonight.
Well, he absolutely did. And of course, it was full of holes and factual inaccuracies. Some of us would call them lies or gaslighting, including the $1.5 billion statement that's been proven false time and time again regarding Hunter Biden. By opening up the door, he could have, if he was so worried about Hunter Biden, he should have asked the FBI to do an investigation. We have legal channels for doing this overseas. We actually have processes and procedures in place. Instead, he sent his personal attorney to go over and meet with people who have been arrested today for violating campaign finance laws. If you conspire, if you aid or abet in any way in any of those violations, that would put people like his personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani, in danger. And if he told Mayor Giuliani to do that, he would also be responsible. This is a very messy situation that he has created on his own. If he had really been interested, again, in Hunter Biden and what happened, he could have used legal channels to do so instead of his own non-government employee, personal attorney, meeting with people who are busy breaking laws, as we find out today.
Well, Ethan, if you say that Hunter has been cleared, I'm not aware that there's been an in-depth investigation. There are a few journalists who have been writing about this. They have been asking questions, but it seems like right now we still have more questions than we do answers because I haven't seen an in-depth investigation.
Right. No, I didn't say Hunter was cleared entirely. It was the $1.5 billion that President Trump said that Hunter received. That's not true. That's been fact-checked numerous times. That never was funded. That's a number that somebody else came up with. That's never held to be true. There is truth in the $50,000 a month that he was collecting, but not $1.5 billion to fund something that was never funded.
Okay, and
so the president said that just on camera.
Yes, and I want to make sure that we are clear when you were talking about refugees and migrants earlier, because we've looked back to see what the president said. So it's out there, it's factual, and people can decide how they feel about it. He talked about the governor bringing large amounts of Somali refugees, as you referenced. He said, but without considering the impact on schools, communities, and taxpayers, that he has issued an executive order that no one will be resettled without express written consent of that city or state, because you should be able to decide what's best for your city or state. That's the context of what he had to say earlier. We want to make sure for people who didn't see it, those are the president's words, and they can decide for themselves how they feel about that policy, which he has clearly put into an executive order. For now, gentlemen, thank you both. Gregg, I know you've got a new book out this week. Tell us the title. We've been busy, so we didn't get to it.
Yes, well, it's called Witch Hunt, the story of the greatest mass delusion in American political history. And it basically poses the question, you know, how did a small group of powerful unelected officials operating in the shadows of secrecy manage to convince millions of Americans that the president was a traitor without any credible evidence? And this, of course, is now the subject of William Barr and John Durham's investigation. How did it happen, is what Barr said. How could the president be accused of the most noxious crime in America, and now we know it wasn't true? The information he was getting didn't match with the documents, and so now his investigation is well underway and is expanding. But Witch Hunt, my book, tells the story of what I believe to be corruption and lawlessness, and we may find out more at the end of next week if and when the Inspector General's report comes out.
We hear that that might be next week. Ethan, when you've got your book out, you come back. We'll talk about yours as well. Ethan and Gregg, thank you both for being with us on this busy, busy night.